let's sit here and chat about F1 this year and ahead of things getting back on track later this month with the launches and pre-season and all that. And we'll start off with McLaren, because this is one of, I'd say, 3 teams with the potential for internal fireworks between their drivers this year. Not saying there will be, but there's just that lingering back of the mind possibility of it. With Lando Norris, he's very well versed in McLaren and the struggles they've had. He's been with McLaren his entire time in F1, with them before in the driver academy as well since 2017, back when it was still with Honda. He's well versed in the struggles they've had and getting them back up to the top now, where they're the reigning Constructors champion. And he said at the end of last season that this year, or next year, 2025, will be his year. Tell you what, I love the ambition, I do. Whether it can be his year or not, well, I don't know. I mean, for it to be his year, I do think he needs to work on lap 1 and not losing positions on that opening lap, working on his starts. And he also, in my opinion, does still need to show he can win a race that is a close-fought battle with his rivals. Because I'm just throwing it out there, in F1 he hasn't done that yet. All of his wins have been kind of not close fights, if you know what I mean. And when I say close fight between rivals, I mean, say, Austria last year, before they started playing silly buggers. I think Norris will be in the championship fight this year, but whether it will be his year or not really does depend. Remains to be seen. But with Oscar, meanwhile, bringing him into things, I don't think he's just gonna roll over and accept the number 2, accept McLaren backing Norris, which I'm sure they won't unless it becomes clear later in the year that they should. You know, Oscar, he's not gonna roll over and just be the number 2, especially with who his manager is. You know, Piastri's going to want to take that chance to prove that he's, you know, the better McLaren driver, the one that they should back. If we do get to a point in the season where McLaren decide to back one driver over another, you know? That's kind of where the possibility of internal fireworks lays with McLaren, and it kind of just does depend on Piastri with how he is this year, if he can make that step heading into his 3rd season like we saw make a step from year 1 into year 2. He's got the ability to win a championship some year in F1, you know? Quite a few people, he is seen as a future champion. Whether that year will be 2025, again, remains to be seen. It's really difficult to predict who could be the one coming out on top, because it's probably going to be a pretty freaking close fight this year. But getting back on track to Piastri, he has proved that, you know, he can withstand pressure running at the front, you know, like Baku last year, withstanding the pressure and getting that win. In terms of the Constructors' Championship, both drivers being up there is going to be very useful to McLaren. I mean, you have to assume that McLaren are going to be up there again with their car, and they're in a good position with their drivers. You can only assume that with a little bit of luck, they will not make the same mistakes as they did last year and will be serious contenders. But they're going to have an Italian team to contend with, because let's take a turn down to Maranello, to Italy, and to Ferrari. Well, I don't think there will be any internal fireworks with their drivers. I don't expect there to be any big issues between Leclerc and Hamilton. Again, there's just that back of the mind lingering possibility of it. All that kind of depends on Hamilton and how he does. I'll get to Hamilton in a second though. Charles first. I think it goes without much saying that he's proved that if Ferrari can provide the car, then we can expect to see him in the championship fight this year. 2024 was frankly his best season to date, and with the trajectory Ferrari are on, if they can continue with that, then you have to imagine that Leclerc will be continuing that into this year and will be in that fight at the front. He's there in qualifying pace and race pace, which has been a real strength of his tire management as well. He's got the ability to do it. But of course, it's a waiting game to see on if he does do it or not, if 2025 can be Ferrari's year. It is a new challenge from having Lewis Hamilton as his teammate as well, but honestly, I think he'll cope just fine. I mean, he was fine against Vettel in the same machinery over the 2 seasons they were teammates. He beat him both times. Yes, I know Vettel's not Hamilton, but still a multiple-time world champion. And you know, Leclerc was a lot earlier in his F1 career at that point. You know, he's more experienced now. Of course, again, Hamilton, 7-time world champion, but he's been fine against Hamilton in different machinery. He'll be fine against him in the same, okay? Well, that's my opinion anyway. And as for Hamilton, I feel like he's the one question mark with Ferrari this year. Last year, while he had some great performances in races, generally his races were better than qualifying. he did have some qualifying struggles. He seemed really happy so far at Ferrari for what we've seen, and it remains to be seen if he can translate that into finding his groove again on track. And also remains to be seen how he handles it when Ferrari inevitably Ferrari him for the first time. And how Team LH reacts over on Twitter. Look, Team LH, I love you guys, but the more unhinged side of you, yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the dumpster fire that's gonna happen when Hamilton gets Ferrari'd for the first time, I'm not gonna lie. He did apparently crash during Ferrari's winter testing in Barcelona recently, which I'm not in any way surprised that he crashed, because he was driving the SF23, which was unpredictable at the best of times. As I saw someone say on Reddit, it's 3-0 to the SF23. But look, I think we can expect Hamilton to be there or thereabouts, at the very least once the season gets going next month. But how there he will be, it kind of hinges on him finding a bit of his old groove again and kind of improving that qualifying form, kind of getting on that form that we saw like Silverstone, Spa, Vegas, Abu Dhabi for example. And also him gelling with the team, which he does seem to be doing quite well. He does seem really happy at Ferrari. Ferrari are in a good position for the next couple of years, I think. A man who has a whack of talent behind him and can win a championship in Charles Leclerc, and the most successful F1 driver of all time alongside him in Lewis Hamilton, who the entire team can learn from. But these two top teams, McLaren and Ferrari, I personally think this is where the constructors fight will be. Because like McLaren, I do think Ferrari will be serious contenders. With Red Bull, Mercedes, both hand drivers who aren't all that experienced in F1, we're talking no races and 11 races. Nothing against Kimi or Lawson, but I just don't see Red Bull or Mercedes being involved in the constructors fight this year. Hence I think McLaren v Ferrari is going to be resumed for the constructors this year. And now on to Red Bull, the third team that I think has the possibility for internal fireworks. Red Bull having internal fireworks depends on Liam Lawson not drowning and being able to bring a serious challenge to Max. I have to know how possible it is to happen, but there's always a chance. Okay, one could argue that Red Bull have been having internal fireworks for the last year, and honestly, you'd be correct in saying that, but you know what I mean. Until proven otherwise, we have to assume that Max Verstappen will be a contender for the championship again. But it depends on if Red Bull can get on top of their issues that cropped up last year, and if they don't, if Max can make the difference again. Okay, there's no question on if Verstappen can make the difference. We know he can make up for a bad car, or a not so good car. But I'm not so sure Red Bull should just rely on that, because that could risk burning him out. And then they're screwed. But regardless, while we have to assume Max will be in the fight, and I think he will be, I don't think he'll win it. I do not think Max Verstappen will go 5 in a row. I think we're going to have a different champion this year. His teammate Liam Lawson, meanwhile, he's an interesting one. Only 11 races under his belt, and he's already a Red Bull driver. First of all, I hope we can all, and by all I mean Red Bull, the media, fans, everyone, can give him the slack he needs to get up to speed, because at the end of the day, he's still only done about half a season's worth of races. He's still more on the inexperienced side of things. If he ends up somehow being able to take it to Verstappen, then things could get quite interesting, and from what we've seen of him on track, I cannot imagine Lawson just laying down and accepting being number 2 unless there's a title at stake or something, or Red Bull demand it or whatever. He'll want to prove that Red Bull should keep him for the long run. Now, do I expect it to happen? No! I'm not expecting him to be bringing it to Verstappen. Well, not until maybe the end of the year at least. With that said, I do think Lawson will do alright. You know, he's a decent enough driver. I think he'll do alright in the Red Bull. But I'm keeping my expectations in check for him because A, the inexperience, and B, the rocky history that second Red Bull seat has. Oh, also, you know that whole FlexiWing technical directive news that came out recently? Yeah, that. According to Autoracer.it, Red Bull ain't too happy about the whole thing, because apparently they invested a lot of time and money into improving the flexibility of their wing profiles of the RB21. So, Red Bull ain't happy. And finally on this video, Mercedes. Russell is finally the actual for-real team leader at Mercedes. After what, 3 full seasons? This is 4th season Mercedes, he finally gets to be the team leader at long last for him. And if he can continue the form that we saw from him kind of toward the end of last year, you know, like in Vegas where he got the pole in qualifying and then he just dominated the race after the Ferraris fell away, the strong qualifying form, the consistent race performances, he'll do alright. He'll be just fine if he can continue that, you know, and he can handle things and can help lead Mercedes into the new regulations, you know. Meanwhile, next to him, he's got a rookie for a teammate. Very different from Mark to go for a rookie driver, but maybe he's doing something different will work out for them and paying dividends. Or maybe it won't and Kimi will drown horribly. I hope he doesn't, of course. And I think he'll do alright. He's got a good enough driver to learn off alongside him. And then there's Bottas as well in the wings, who he can probably learn a thing or two from. I'm not expecting anything world beaten to the kid though. Unlike with the Lawson at Red Bull, we should all give him the slack that rookies need to, you know, to learn, to grow. Because I mean, he is an absolute rookie, never done any races before. But I think we will see him on the podium at least once this year. But I really don't know what to expect for the Mercedes boys this year, purely because Mercedes, if we've learned anything for this team in the not the turbo hybrid era, the ground effect era, they can be a bit up and down all over the place. The interesting thing is though, if I'm not mistaken, both George Russell and Kimi Antonelli are out of contract at the end of this year. Now there's every chance that both get re-signed. They could just decide to stick with the current pairing they have if Mercedes are happy with what they see this year from them. Stick with the two drivers they have that stability into 2026 with the new big regulation change that's coming up. But there's also the chance that one driver could be replaced or help both if they feel like that's necessary. So basically, Kimi needs to show Mark that they made the right choice bringing him into F1 so quickly, and George Russell needs to prove that he can be, you know, the guy to lead Mercedes into the new regulations. But I'm just saying, they got Mullet Man over here in as a reserve driver, you know, and Mercedes, they know what Bottas can do. They're very familiar with him. If they feel like they need to replace one of the drivers, they could very well stick Bottas back in. I can see that happening. And come back for part 2 where we will speak about the other 6 teams. What's your thoughts on the top 4 teams for F1 this year? Let me get your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.